Hey everyone, my name is Leanne and today I'm bringing you the mid-year book Freakout tag. I feel like this tag is such a staple of BookTube now. I feel like everyone does this tag around this halfway point of the year, and I think it's a really fantastic way of checking in on people's reading, seeing how they're getting on and doing the same for yourself. I will leave the original creators links down below in the description, and I highly encourage you to check out their original tags. But without further ado, let's get into the questions. The first of which is simply, what is your favourite book of 2020 so far? I have done a full video where I talk about my 10 favourite reads of the year so far, and I will leave that video linked down below in the description for you to check out. But the top book in that video was Promising Young Women by Caroline O'Donoghue. I love this book so much. This isn't about an adrift woman in her 20s who begins an affair with an older man that she works with. I love that kind of setup of an adrift woman in her 20s, 30s, like that kind of thing. I find relationships in books that have power imbalances really interesting. I think the way the author has so carefully crafted how this man begins to control our protagonist is done just so subtly and so well. But also, if you are someone who has been in a relationship like that before, whether age was a factor, whether it was just power, you notice those little behaviours that start to build up and take hold of you or chip away at you. We watch our main character as she begins to spiral out of control and is even putting herself at risk because of how she feels about this whole situation. There were so many parts of this book that I just underlined because Caroline O'Donoghue was just able to articulate things so acutely and perfectly, and I was really confident going into this book that I would love it, but it's one of my favourite books of all time. The next question is, what is your favourite sequel that you've read this year? Now, I really don't read many series, so I always have very slim pickings for this question. There are two that kind of work for it. I really loved Wonderland by Juno Dawson. This isn't really a sequel, it's just kind of part of Juno's London series. You don't need to read these books in order, they are completely independent stories. It's just that some of the characters from one book will pop up in another book. They're just kind of like little Easter eggs. But I guess the actual sequel that I've read this year is Beyond Platform 13 by Sybil Pounder and Eva Ibbotson. This is a follow-up to The Secret of Platform 13, which I also read this year and really loved. This is a middle grade duology. The original book came out, I think, the 90s? And this novel is inspired by that original story. If you love middle grade fantasy, then you will just love this book. It's so much fun, it's so quirky. There are amazing set pieces which I think really make middle grade fantasy. I would really recommend checking these books out. The next question is a new release that you haven't read yet but would like to, and I'm going to go for a book that has very recently come out, and that is The Shelf by Helen Acton. This is a piece of women's contemporary fiction, but it sounds so fun. So this is about a young woman who thinks her boyfriend is going to propose to her. Instead, what happens is she is dumped on TV and is entered into a reality show where she has to compete with loads of other women who I guess are in the same situation as her. And it's meant to be like a really feminist book. I am someone that really enjoys shows like Love Island but has a very critical approach to them, so I think this is a book that I would really love, and I've heard so many good things about it. Question 4 is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year, and oh boy, there are so many. When Life Gives You Mangoes by Corinne Getton comes out in October, and this is a middle grade book that is set in Jamaica. I've heard Ben, I will leave his channel links down below so you can check it out. I've heard him talk about it a lot recently and it just sounds so up my street. Dolly Alderton's fiction debut, Ghost, is coming out, which I'm really excited for because I'm a basic fucking bitch. The First Woman is a I think slightly literary fiction novel that is based around Ugandan mythology, and I love me some mythology retelling. So Rachel Long's poetry collection, My Darling from the Lions, is coming out and I'm so excited for that. There's just so many good books. There's so many. The next question is your biggest disappointment, and unfortunately for me, this was Come Again by Robert Webb. I loved the premise of this book and I had really loved Robert Webb's non-fiction book, but this fiction debut just really didn't work for me. I will leave my wrap-up links down below in the description if you want to check out my full thoughts on that book, but there was a lot of problems with it. I think It really suffered from that thing where the idea was better than the execution. The next question is your biggest surprise, and I'm gonna go for Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. Now this might seem like a weird one for biggest surprise because this is such a highly acclaimed book. Like, everyone that I know who has read this book has thought it was phenomenal. It's such a classic, but I think sometimes when a book is really hyped, I think, oh, I'm not gonna like it. Like, I'm gonna be that person who doesn't like this incredible book. This book is set in both 1976 and 1815, and it follows a writer named Dana who is transported back in time where she is assumed to be a slave, and gradually she figures out that the reason she is being transported back in time is because she needs to save the life of a young white boy who is one of her ancestors. It raises a lot of really morally complex issues, and it's such a fascinating look at race, at human nature, at relationships, at family. I think maybe the reason I didn't expect to think this was as incredible as I do is because of that sci-fi element. I'm not really into sci-fi, but this book was just incredible. The next question is your favorite new author, debut or new to you, and there are two authors that I want to mention here. The first of those is Beth O'Leary, who wrote The Flat Chair and The Switch. She's a contemporary women's fiction writer, and her stories are just so much fun and so lovely. The Flat Chair is about two young people who share a flat but they never meet because of how their work shifts are, and it's about the romance between those two. The Switch is a really charming novel that is basically about a woman in her 20s, 30s-ish swapping lives with her grandma. Like, there's a very basic overview of what it is, but it is just so much fun. Both of her books are so cute, and she's going to be a complete auto-buy author for me. But I think if it's absolute favourite new author, it's Elizabeth Acevedo. Her YA books are so on point. I read With the Fire on High and Clap When You Land, and I really want to read her other book, The Poet X, and I think she has some poetry collections as well. I think she's just the most incredible writer. I think she uses words with such delicacy. With the Fire on High is about a teenage mother, the struggles that she has balancing being a mother and her studies and her career, having relationship. The food writing in this book is stunning because our main character wants to become a chef, and it's just beautiful. Clap When You Land is a fascinating story told in verse that is about the relationship with two sisters who don't know they are sisters until their father dies in a plane crash. Again, she is just an auto-buy author for me. I think her command of language and her command of storytelling, her command of pacing and timing, superb. The next question is your newest fictional crush. Now, sometimes people answer this question and they're like, I don't get crushes on people in books. I do. Oh boy, I do. Can I remember the names of any of these characters? No, I can't, but that's fine. Really early on this year, I read Our Stop, which was a romance novel about two people who don't quite meet on the tube. They like communicate through like ads in a newspaper, and the guy in that book, like the male love interest, I don't think he's real. I mean, obviously he's not real, it's a fictional book. What the fuck, Leanne? But I don't think a man like him exists. He's like slightly laddie, but very professional in his work. But he's also like very sensitive, and he goes to therapy. Oh boy, bring me a man that is dealing with his issues. My other fictional crush is from Grown Ups by Marion Keyes, and I also can't remember what this character is called, but she's like the arty character. I feel like if you read this book, you'll know which character I'm talking about, but she just has a vibe. The next question is a book that made you cry, and I don't often cry at books. I feel like there's definitely been a few like emotional moments, but I can't really remember any of them. But what I am going to go for is Liberty by V.J. Spencer. This is a debut thriller novel. It is self-published and the author is a very good friend of mine. But the reason this made me cry was I was just so proud of my friend for her book. Like, I know how much hard work went into this, and finally getting my hands on a copy meant so much to me. The next question is a book that made you happy, and for this I'm going to go for The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. There are a lot of sad moments in this book. Like, I don't think it's a dishonest portrayal of a queer experience, but it made me so happy that this book exists. In this book we are following a boy from a very young age up to when he goes to college, and it follows him developing an understanding of his sexuality and gender identity, the intersections of his sexuality and his race and his upbringing. We see his curiosity begin to peak in drag culture, and it just makes me so happy that books like this are getting more focus and attention. And this is another YA book that is told in verse, and I just love that technique with storytelling. The next question is your newest favourite character, and I'm going to go for Amira from Such a Fun Age. This is a novel that follows a 25-year-old babysitter who is accused of abducting a child when she's taking care of her in a supermarket because Amira is black and the child is white. And this sets off a chain of events that nobody really could have predicted, and it's about privilege and the relationship between Amira and the mother of the child she takes care of. I would love both a killer night out with Amira, but also I would love to just like chill out with her and not really do anything. I just feel like we could have like really deep chats about life and stuff. The next question is the most beautiful book you have received this year, whether it was gifted to you or you bought it for yourself, and I'm gonna go for Asha and the Spirit Bird by Jasbinder Balan. Now this just doesn't do credit to how beautiful this book is, but I love like the shade of green of like the background of the cover. I think it's a colour you don't really see used that much. I think all of the little design elements and the animals and the plants are just so beautiful, and I love the shiny font, even though you really cannot like see it properly on camera, but I just love it. I think it's so beautiful. The cover and interior design is by Helen Crawford White, and the cover and interior illustration is by H. The next question is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? All of them. Enough books to get my TBR below 100 books. Let's see how that goes. And the next question is, who is your favourite book community member? Now, there are so many people I could pick out here, but I do want to give a big shout out to Olivia's Catastrophe. I love her channel. What I really love about her channel is like, she's just got like a really chilled out vibe about her, and I really love that. Like, she feels like someone you would definitely want to be friends with. Like, I definitely want to be friends with her, and I really love the range of books she reads. Like, I really love booktube channels where someone can be talking about like a YA book 1 minute and a classic the next, who read a real mix of genres and are talking about books that I maybe don't have on my radar. And I'll of course leave Olivia's channel links down below in the description. So that's it. That's the mid-year book freakout tag. Done for another year. Have you read any of the books that I've mentioned? Leave me a comment down below and let me know. I hope you guys are doing well, and I will talk to you in my next video.